they fulfill their desires, set to waste of existence.
Anxious Earth is rising. Anxious Earth is rising. I'm so happy.
We spend our lives searching for this sense of belonging. Some people die before they fulfill their desires.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you? I gotta pretend to be surprised here. Let's see here. Oh, hey, double triple channel. This is Ron in New Hampshire. How are you? Yep, my name is Ron. I live in New Roll, New Hampshire. I'm surrounded by forest wild animals. You saw my last stream. You saw how beautiful it is here. It's pretty cool. We got a bunch of snow yesterday, or was it the day before? Whatever. A bunch. Nice heavy snow that stuck to the trees for a whole day, which was really cool. Still some of it stuck on the trees out there. So that's really cool. Except it was kind of hard to shovel because it was heavy snow. This is a live recording. If you're watching this on YouTube somewhere or wherever, it's a video of VOD. It's a live recording, so it's going to be scuff. It's not, an edited down video or whatever. You know how that works, right? If you saw something in the title, and I'm not talking about it at the moment, you fast forward to wherever you can find it, in the video. And I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff today. I got kind of a late start. It's about 10 minutes to 10 Eastern Standard Time on February 22nd, 222. 222. And we'll talk about Tariffs. We'll talk about astronauts on Mars, Dennis the Menace. I don't know, wherever we end up, that's what we're going to talk about. I want to make sure that I'm in sync here. So let me do a sync test here. I'm going to clap and then make sure that the clap makes the sound at the same time as my hands come together. I think that was okay. Kind of hard to tell, but I think it was okay. So yeah, we had the decision from Supreme Court, which took them forever to announce it. I think they had the decision a long time ago, and they sat on it for a month or whatever. So why'd they do that? That was kind of weird, you know. Oh, I got some IRL pictures I was going to show too. Maybe I'll do that next stream. I just did an IRL last stream, so I got a few little videos I shot around here. So yeah, why did SCOTUS wait so long to announce that? That's kind of weird, you know. They wanted to make the timing at a certain time, and that's kind of weird. I'm wondering, were they like sitting on it, you know, telling all their friends what the decision would be, so that the markets could, you know, people could scan the markets? Were they just waiting and collecting bribes, you know, hoping they could get, you know, more bribes, you know, before the decision? I don't know why they waited so long. One possibility was they were waiting for a Congress to pass the spending bill, because they're, you know, it's a couple $1 billion or whatever, close to a couple $1 billion at stake on that decision, on that opinion, you know, the decision on the case. And you know, if they knew, you know, a couple months ago that they were going to be a couple $1 billion short, then Congress wouldn't be able to spend as much, you know, or they'd have to borrow more or whatever. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So maybe that had something to do with it too. I'm not sure. Don't know why they waited so long, but I do know a lot of the other stuff about the case. So we'll get into that a little bit. I wasn't sure how to approach this, how to explain it. I guess we'd go back at the beginning, right? And right all the way back before the country started, you know. One of the main things that the colonists didn't like was taxes, right? They didn't like the king making taxes. They didn't like the king making taxes without the people's representatives doing it. You know, they want the people's representatives to be in that loop there, to say, you know, make the laws, right? To do the taxes. And but instead they had a king, you know, all on this side of the ocean that was making taxes. And they didn't like that, you know, because the king didn't know what was going on here, and you know the whole thing, right? You got to have representatives, you know, speaking for you when the laws are made. So they were upset about that, and that was one of the main, you know, taxation without representation. That was one of the main core things that got our country going, and it's been a core value. You know, I mean, it's just generally laws, you know, laws are by the people, ruled by the people, democracy. That's what democracy means. So you can't have, you know, just a king making up laws, you know, especially taxes. You know, people don't like taxes, and tariffs are a tax. And at the very beginning, the first taxes, the only tax, they didn't have the 16th Amendment, or the 16th Amendment, so they didn't have a way to, was it the 16th? God, now I forget. We'll look it up when we get the Constitution up here. But they didn't, you know, there was no income tax. So, you know, what do you do? The only thing they had was, tariffs, duties, and that kind of thing, you know. And they couldn't, any tax had to be equal among all the states. You know, they couldn't, like, tax, you know, one state more than the other. They couldn't, you know, a whole bunch of stuff they couldn't do. Let me see if I can find a copy of the Constitution out here. And we'll look at that, because that's Constitution. Let's see. No. I think it's over here. Shit, that didn't work. constitutioncenter.org. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. No, it doesn't want that. Maybe it's .com. Okay. What am I? Let's ask Google. Constitution. Center. Because I know they got a copy of it that works. All right, what did I do wrong here? Constitution. I don't know why it wasn't going there. All right, read the full text. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to bring up a copy of the Constitution here. Hopefully. Shut that off, turn that on, flip that over. There we go. Oh, and it's kind of bright, isn't it? I don't know if they got a dark inclement weather alert. Like, really? You know, we know. All right. Yep, I don't know if they got a dark mode in this thing. I guess not, so sorry about that. It's going to be bright. So, Article 1, that's the Congress. They wanted to set up a democracy, so they said Article 1. Article 1 is Congress. Article 2 is the executive, which is the president. Another executive is another word for the president. Same thing, right? If anybody says executive, the executive or the president, it's the same thing. Or sometimes they say the executive branch, then it's the president and all the cabinet members and everything. All right, so Article 1 is Congress. And you scroll down here and you get to Article 2, executive. 3 is the courts. And in 4, they talk about the states, some stuff about the states. And 5 talks about how to amend the Constitution. And there's some other ones there. So when they set it up, they said, hey, you know, we want Congress, all legislative power. They didn't say just some things, you know, or just domestic or just whatever, or, you know, or just, it's all legislative powers. Any laws that make a law means telling people that they got to do something, right? If you got to pay a tax, that's got to be a law that says that, right? If it's not a law, you don't have to do it, right? That's how government works with laws. So everything that tells you what you got to do has got to be done by Congress, because it's a democracy and Congress is elected by the people directly. Senators weren't at the beginning, but the House was, and now all of them are elected directly. Most, even the Senate, most of them I think were even elected by popular vote when this started. So just to talk, okay, first part talks about the two houses and how they're elected. Then we get into powers, right? What can the Congress do? And there was a little bit of a deal, you know, when they were setting up the Constitution. It was like, Madison thought, well, if we say what the Congress can do and don't say anything else, then the assumption is that they can't do anything but what we say they can do. And another thought, well, no, we should say what they can't do also. So that's what the Bill of Rights was. But it's actually, there is a section in here that talks about what Congress can't do. Powers of Congress, and it says powers denied to Congress. So it does have something in here where it says what they can't do, right? But when we look at what they can do, powers of Congress, number 1, here's what Congress says. First thing, number 1, Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, excises, to pay the debts, blah, blah, blah. Right? That's tariffs, duties, same thing, right? It's a tax. Tariff is a tax. Nobody denies that. Nobody denies that tariff is a tax. It raises revenue. So first it said here. Let me show you there. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debt, provide common defense, general welfare, but they have to be the same for all the states, right? So that's the first power, right? First they say, number one, it's got to be Congress. That's the most important branch. That's the branch that makes all the rules. All the rules. All legislation goes through Congress. Then what things can Congress do? Then it goes to this section here, powers of Congress. Number one, first thing, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. See? They were really pissed that the king was making taxes without, people from the colonies, representatives being involved in it. So, main deal, that's why one of the main reasons why our country got started, and throughout the whole history of the country today, people are pissed about these tariffs, right? Most people, overwhelming majority, do not like these tariffs. People don't like taxes. They don't like to be taxed. They know it's necessary. They'll put up with a little bit of it, but it's a big deal. So, let me check something here. I'm gonna pop out chat here. Hey, Suck Now, nice to see you. How are you doing? We got somebody in chat. Sorry, I had the wrong window up there and I didn't have my chat window. Let me pop out the chat here so I can actually see it when it comes up. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Hang on. Got technical stuff. Hang on. There we go. Pop out chat. There we go. Now I'll be able to see it. I had my browser window up there looking at the Constitution, but I couldn't see chat. Nice to see you, Sock. Now, thank you for stopping by. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're talking about Constitution and stuff like that, tariffs, blah, 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 right? So this is, that's a big deal, right? It's kind of like the most important thing, basically, is taxes, and that only Congress can do taxes, and Congress has to be elected by the people. It's kind of core, it's the core thing. So that's very important. The other thing they wanted to make sure, because remember I said earlier that in the beginning, they said in the Constitution that when here, I'll show you right here. Learn how to read the Constitution. It's not that hard to read. Right here, House of Representatives. It says, chosen by the people of the several states. So the House of Representatives are elected by the people. It said that right in the Constitution. And it has to be districts, that are defined and all. And that's kind of a big deal right now, right? Off topic right now, but and also in the beginning they said that the taxes had to be apportioned according to the number of people in the states, which was changed by the income tax. And in the Senate, it says that the Senate composed of 2 senators from each state, and every state has to have the same number of senators. We can change the number of senators, but we can't change that each state has to have the same amount. That's hardwired in, that you can't even change it in the Constitution. Every state has to have the same number of senators. That's just the way it is. And it says that it's chosen by the legislature thereof. And a lot of them, the legislature would they had an election, and the legislature would kind of say, okay, this is who we elected, and that's who's going to be senator. So, but then eventually they got to the, what was it, 16th Amendment, where they changed that. Was it the 16th? 15th? No, 17th? somewhere in there. All right. So so the senator, they kind of call that the upper house because they want senators that have more experience and stuff like that. They got to be 35 years old instead of 30 years old. So they want senators to be a little bit smarter, more experienced, and all that. But any legislation when they do in the legislation process there, any laws they make have to pass the House and the Senate. You know, and either for most laws, either the Senate or the House can begin the process. So if the Senate says, hey, we want to make a law, they make up a law, it passes the Senate, then it has to go to the House and they have to pass it. And then it goes to the president. The president has to sign it. You know, right? You remember that, right? Hi, Maddie. Hi. Welcome. That was the original system. Yeah, that's the original system. Turns out it was found to be horrible, bad idea immediately. Yeah, a lot of stuff was. What I just described is still the way bills are doing, but so some things were changed, like they changed the way the president was elected and things like that. Nepotism. Oh yeah, there's a lot of corruption. Yeah, a lot of corruption. Yeah, corruption kind of. I don't know how you do a system without and kind of. I mean, it's going to be. If they don't follow the rules, it doesn't matter what rules you make up. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty much any system you do. If the population is just susceptible to corruption, it's going to happen. I don't know how you get around that. So anyway, the Senate is the big, supposed to be the more experienced or whatever, right? And there are fewer of them, so each senator has more power. And it's not part of the Constitution, but the Senate has set up a deal where they got something called a filibuster, which basically says that almost anything that passes the Senate has got to get 3/5, 60% of them have to agree to it. So they got a little bit more, power or whatever in the Senate. Powers and duties of Congress, rights and okay. So, yeah, here's the whole. Okay, so we get to the powers, right? So originally the Senate was just the legislatures, and after a while, most of them would just do whatever the popular vote. They would allow the people to vote on senator, and the legislators would appoint whoever the people voted for. And then we got that amendment. I think it was the 17th Amendment. I'm going to look that up here because that's kind of bugging me that I don't remember that. Yeah, senators. 16th, income taxes. Right. So I had it right. Okay, 16th was 17th was. So they eventually they did the 17th Amendment where the senators. Where they put in the Constitution that senators had to be picked by the people. So in the beginning, it just said that the senators were appointed by the legislature, but then later on they said they put it in the Constitution. And by this time, most of the states already were kind of doing that anyway. So, God, they don't put the dates here. That's awful that they don't put the dates for these things in here, which is kind of all right. So back to powers. So we get the main power of Congress is to tax. That's the first thing. First thing you put in here under powers of Congress is to lay and collect taxes. So every single thing in this Constitution says Congress has to be the one to do taxes, not the president, not the Supreme Court, not the, whoever. It's got to be Congress. Congress is the only one who can do taxes. And then There's another rule in here that says, let's see, it's under this Article 1 here in Section 7, under the legislative process, it says all bills for raising revenue, which is a tax, right? And so most of it is taxes, shall originate in the House of Representatives. So not only do the taxes have to be here, I'll show you see Section 7 here, legislative process. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. But the Senate can propose amendments and all that in the whole process. So that's over and over and over and over again in the Constitution. It says Congress makes taxes, and it's got to be the House of Representatives that does it first. And the reason they did that is because they wanted. Remember, the House of Representatives was elected by the people initially, and the Senate was appointed by the legislatures initially. So they wanted the power of taxation to be to the closest to the people. They wanted to be in Congress. They wanted to be the House of Representatives, who are elected by the people directly. So it was so important to them. They were so pissed off about the king just making up taxes that they wanted to make sure that the people were absolutely in the loop whenever a tax was made or taxes were raised or whatever, So over and over and over again, they did that in the Constitution. They said that. So there's no ambiguity about it. There's no, preumbra, or whatever in the Constitution about it, what's going on with taxes. It's got to be Congress. Only Congress can do that. So, and you can't, right? And if you want to make a change to the Constitution, you gotta, if you want to change what it says there about Congress making taxes, yeah, you can change it if you want, but you got to amend the Constitution to change it because it's written in the Constitution, the exact procedure that you have to go through to do a tax. Right here, it's the process. Here's the process you have to go through. You got to start in the House of Representatives. Now this 17th Amendment here that let me scroll down here to the 17th Amendment, see if there shouldn't be anything in there. 16th Amendment. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to census or enumeration. But it says Congress does that again, over and over and over and over again in the Constitution. It says Congress is the one that can make a tax. Only Congress. So now we got. Initially, that's how they did it, and it was always, Congress would make a law that says, okay, importations of whatever of tea, is going to have this tax on it, and importations of, whatever, wool or anything else that they were importing in, hemp, it's whatever they're going to tax. This is how much we're going to tax when it comes in, and from what countries or whatever. It was always Congress, and they would say the actual amount, the percent, tax at this much percent when it comes into the United States, That's how they did it. And then in the 1930s, there was a thing here called, let's see here. Oh, first we had one in this McKinley tariff, which was a tariff they made. It's protectionism. That's what tariffs are. It's protectionism. It's so that people get upset. People are businesses and stuff like that make things in the United States and they want to sell them to people, and then somebody in another country makes it, and in that other country for whatever reason they're able to make it cheaper, and so they imported into the United States, and people in the United States can buy from that other country cheaper. And so the businesses in the United States get upset and say, "Oh, why, this? Why are we?" And they get upset, and then the politicians say, "Oh, we'll tariff that other thing coming from the other country," to appease businesses who have a lot of money and can blah blah blah. You know how it goes, right? So one of the first earlier ones here was this thing they call it the McKinley tariff, and what that did was it raised the, it says the average duty, so apparently they had it for different things or whatever, but they raised it to 50%, which was designed to protect domestic industries, and workers, right? So it was protectionist from foreign competition, right there. But what this did is it allowed the president to lower tariffs if he wanted to. Here it is. The act removed tariffs on sugar, molasses, tea, so it had certain things. The idea was to secure reciprocal trade. Okay, if the items were... So it says the idea was to secure reciprocal trade by allowing the executive branch to use the threat of imposing tariffs as a means. So it gave flexibility. This one gave flexibility to the president. And it said, although this delegation of power had the appearance of being an unconstitutional violation of the non-delegation doctrine, it was upheld by this court case. It authorizes the executive to act as an agent of Congress. Okay, so that's a problem. So this is where the problem started to begin with, way back here in 1892. They made this law which was unconstitutional. This thing called the non-delegation clause. It's basically saying that these laws here, these powers that go to Congress. Where is it? Where are we at here? Section 8. All these powers, to borrow money, to do all these different things, coin money. All these powers are for Congress, and so the very early on they said, well, yeah, you can't delegate. Congress can't delegate those powers because it's written down in the Constitution that they have them. The only way if Congress wants to delegate it, then they got to have they have to amend the Constitution and give that power to some other branch, So that's how it works, But this McKinley tariff here delegated it anyway, and they had a Supreme Court at the time who was not too it wasn't following the Constitution, and so the Supreme Court upheld it. They had this case, Fields versus Clark. It says it's a early Supreme Court case declining to apply the non-delegation doctrine to the McKinley tariff. So this was the first tariff that I could find where the Supreme Court violated the Constitution and said that the president could change rates of tariffs, even though the Constitution says only Congress can do it. And so they started it like step by step, right? They first they did this thing and said, okay, we're going to have all these tariffs, and the president can lower the tariff or whatever, just kind of adjust it within this range or whatever, and the tariffs would just be there, but he could adjust the rate, higher or lower to kind of negotiate or whatever reason they wanted to do that. And then then they did another, had another law and another law and another law, and each one they kind of made it a little bit worse, a little bit more power to the president. And we've got, let's see here, I've got a table here that shows some of the current tariff laws that are they're still on the books. Let's see here. If I can find that. You know what? Yeah. I had a little conversation with AI, so the AI helped me on some of this stuff. Let's see if I can find it here. The AI made a little chart for me of these things. Here it is. Okay. So we got several. There it is. Okay. You see that? Yeah. Okay. So here's a table of some other acts that they did. This is like 60 years later, right? Or 50 or 60 years later, whatever. They did a Trade Expansion Act, and they said national security. There was, around this time, 60s, there was a big scare. People were afraid that that we were going to get bombed by the Russians or whatever. You know, we're going to nuked, right? We're all going to get nuked. So national security, everybody was afraid of that. So, you know, whenever they did a law and they wanted to get more power, they'd say, "Oh, it's for national security," and people would go, "Okay, we don't want to get nuked," you know. So, you know, and they would be able to pass whatever, you know, stuff. So that's what this was. This was somehow they tied to trade, you know, tariffs to national security. This one here, this is called the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, and this section 232. That's just one section of it, and that's where it talks about tariffs, and basically the president can set whatever rates they want, and the only thing is that they have to have the Commerce Department do an investigation first. And the Commerce Department has to determine that there's this national security reason for changing the tariff. But the Commerce Department, that guy's picked by the president, right? They're confirmed by the Senate, but they're picked by the president. It's his guy, right? Or gal, or whatever. You know? It's so, you know, that's like saying. You know what I'm saying? It's like saying, "Oh, here, you know, you can't do this unless one of your employees says that you can." You know, and you're paying your employee. You know, you have the power to fire your employee. So what's your employee going to do? Is it going to do whatever you say? So it's not really a you know, a limit. You know what I mean? But it does take some time. I don't know what the time limit is here, how long it takes them to do an investigation, or what the laws are. But anyway, that's the only limit on that one. I think there might be a time limit on that one too. But then we did the one in 1974 called the Trade Act. That's the short name, Trade Act of 1974. There's a section in there called Section 301, and that's to address, you know, unfair stuff. So that's kind of like the main reason why the, you know, businesses wanted tariffs to begin with, was to help domestic businesses be more competitive. So that's why they did that. And retaliatory tariffs. See, that's right. That one requires that the United States Trade Representative do an investigation, which is United States Trade Representative. That's not a person. That's an agency. That's a whole agency. So it's more of an independent agency than the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce is like the kitchen cabinet, you know, for the president. This is more of an independent agency, but it's still the president has control over them, basically. And it's the same deal, you know, more or less. It's probably a little bit more distant from the president, but you know. Then there's another section of that same act called 102, which allows for temporary tariffs. and that's International Trade Commission, which is again an independent agency that is like the experts, on international trade, because it's kind of complicated. You got all trade with all these different countries, and the other countries got different rules, and and this is kind of like one of the most complicated areas of law is international law and how that all works, and setting up treaties and agreements and all that. So ITC is probably in the U.S. one of the more competent or more informed or whatever agencies about tariffs and international trade and all that. So it's the same thing, but they have to do a report and say there's an injury, whatever that means, and it's limited. There's a time limit on the thing. And in Section 122, same act, same trade act, saying there's a balance of payment emergency, like an economic type thing, where it's capped at where it can be 15% for only 150 days, and that's a strict cap. These other ones, there's no, this one here they could do anything, right? any amount, and it has to address a balance of trade, but the president can just say, "Oh, I'm doing this, and it's because of a balance of trade emergency," This older one is really superseded by the newer one here, so that one really doesn't count. Let's see. There's another table in here that's kind of cool. It talks about. Here we go. So the 1962 one. It's got to be a Secretary of Commerce has to do an investigation and say it's national security, but there's no cap. You can make it as much as you want. Same with this one. Same with this one. So any of those they can really use. Now there are details in here. The AI here gave me some other details here about what some of the other restrictions are and stuff like that. But the thing is that all of these things, all of these laws here violate this one, the Constitution, because the Constitution says Congress has the power to do the taxes. So it's every one of those things, every one of those laws is delegating that power of Congress to the executive, which you can't do because the Constitution says you can't do it. The Constitution says the power is in Congress. So Congress has to do it. Congress has to say what the rate is and what's being taxed, and from where, for everything. You can't have another branch of government doing that, making up the law. And we've got these tariff laws. The newest one is 1974, so it's what is that? 51 years ago. So 52 years ago. All those people who made those laws are dead or retired, or dead by now, right? Most of them, or retired for sure, right? So. And they were illegal at the time when they made those laws. They were illegal, but the Supreme Court just went along with it. So let's see. I had one other thing in here. Let's see. Oh, you want to know how the Supreme Court justices voted on this? Now what the Supreme Court case was about was not about any of those that I was just talking about. It was about this emergency act, where the president could declare an emergency and make a tariff, and that had no time limit on it or amount or anything. The only requirement was that he had to say there was an emergency, and then it gave him power to tax anybody at any time, any amount. It was absolute, and so they said no on that one. But the court case itself here on this particular one had no effect really, or little effect. I'll explain the effect in a little bit. So here's how they all voted on that one. They said one of the issues when they try to figure out these things between Congress and the executive is if they have a thing called, what I told you about, the non-delegation doctrine, which they've been ignoring lately. That was something that came up very early. There's a doctrine, you can't delegate powers. Congress can't delegate its powers, but they've been ignoring that one for a long time. And then this other one is major question. Is the thing that you're talking about a major, policy thing? Are you talking about, how many gallons of oil is going to be defined as an oil spill, right? Which is maybe important to some people, but it's not, not as big of a deal. Or how, what percentage of fat needs to be in milk from dairy cows, or that kind of thing. Those are smaller details, right? That's not a big deal. But a tax is a major question, And they all said, or all of these, the ones that say yes here, said that it was a major question. Roberts, Gorsuch, and Barrett said it was a major question, that taxes are a major question. Duh. Now Kagan, she didn't actually say no. She said that. Look, this is kind of complicated. Whenever there's a case that goes to the Supreme Court, it's almost always about a statute, right? Somebody, something happens. Somebody sues somebody else. Somebody sues the government, whatever, and they cite a statute. Usually, sometimes they'll cite the Constitution, but usually they'll cite some law that Congress has made, and they'll say, this law is unconstitutional, right, or whatever it is, or the law, doesn't allow this to happen, and so we should be able to do this, blah blah blah. The law that they're talking about was a law about emergency powers to the Congress, and it didn't actually mention tariffs. It said. Yeah, I was kind of misspoke earlier. It didn't actually mention tariffs. It was the president could do anything in terms of regulating commerce, in terms of like saying, oh, we can't import, a certain, guns or something, or we can't import, a certain type of thing, or we're going to block this thing from this country because this country is doing bad things we don't like, or whatever. It's that kind of thing. And that law never said anything about tariffs. That was the thing. And the administration said, well, it says that it regulate the importation of stuff. That means tariffs. And all those other tariff laws use the word tariff. They say they were about tariffs, right? This law was not. It was just about emergency powers on importing stuff and regulating imports. So the Supreme Court said no, we're not gonna. It didn't say tariffs, so we're not gonna count that as what the law allows, because it didn't specifically say tariffs. That's what they were saying. And one of the questions when you're talking about what gets delegated. when they're doing their case, first they look at the statute. If they can resolve the case just by looking at the statute, then they're done. They don't go any further. This is the process they normally go through. They look at the statute. If the statute says, you know, XYZ, and it turns out that somebody is trying to do something that isn't XYZ, and then they say, okay, we're done. That, you know, and that's what happened in this case. The statute didn't say tariffs on it. And so they say, well, okay, he's trying to do tariffs on a law that didn't say that he can do tariffs. We're done. The statute doesn't allow him to do that. But some cases, if the statute is unclear or, you know, there's something else going on, then they can say, okay, what is there a constitutional issue involved in this thing with, you know, the law of the Constitution. And so that's how the judges are supposed to do it. They're supposed to look at the statute first. If they can resolve it just by looking at the wording of the statute, then they're done. They do it. If they can't figure it out by looking at the statute, then they look at the Constitution and see if the statute is constitutional or if there's something else that's in there. And so what happened here was that major question is a constitutional thing. It had nothing. It wasn't statute. You know, it's a constitutional issue. And so what Kagan said was, "Hey, this is you know, we're done. All we have to do is look at the statute, and the statute says, you know, doesn't say that he can do that, so he can't do that. We're done." And so she refused to even look at the major questions. She rejected the idea that the court should look at this concept of major question. It's not that she said there was no major question. She just said that the court shouldn't do that, shouldn't be looking at that. That's what that was about. So I don't know if that's clear or not. That's what it was. That's what it was about. And Sotomayor agreed with Kagan. And let's see. Jackson was kind of complicated. She got into legislative history and stuff like that, but she was kind of the same thing. But Thomas and these other ones actually said that it was not a major question. Can you believe that? Thomas and Alito and Kavanaugh said that taxation power is not a major question. Establishing a tax, setting a tax rates is not a major question. That's what they said. So that's where we're at right now with the Supreme Court. Just total nonsense. Just totally off the you know, not even grounded on anything at this point. So these are so Roberts, Gorsuch, and Barrett said that taxing is a major question. Taxing authority is a major question. Isn't it? Only three of them. Now the other ones, these probably, I'm sure Kagan and Sotomayor and Jackson would also say that it was a major question if they looked at it, but they're saying we shouldn't look at it even because we can resolve it just with the statute. That's what that was about. Let's see here. Congress cannot delegate its core constitutional powers. Okay. So this is the, now I don't know what this is, the AI saying this. And I asked it, can Congress delegate all or any of its constitutional powers to the executive? And it went on and did this whole thing and said yes or no and can it and blah, blah, blah. And it just, you know, it's just spitting back all the stuff that it had heard before. I think there's another table in here somewhere. Let's see. Oh yeah, on with regard to the findings, on some of those tariff laws required that a report be generated by somebody in the executive branch or by an independent agency or something like that. And the courts have said in the past that it doesn't matter what the agencies say, whether the agencies are producing a report that's accurate or true or anything. So there is no they can make up a report and just make it up out of whole cloth and say, oh, it's national security, we got to do this. So in other words, those other laws are saying that the president can make a tariff, whatever amount, uh, just for just on his own. He doesn't even really, there's nothing stopping him from doing it, and that's unconstitutional. So basically all of them, all of these tariff laws are unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has said they are, but they're not. I know how to read. We know how to read the Constitution. We know what it says. So, none of them are constitutional. And the thing is that they've done this. They've kind of incrementally added this power. I mean, we're going all the way back to the McKinley tariff, which was allowing the president to adjust the rate a little bit to negotiate, blah blah blah, and then they just kind of kept incrementally adding more and more and more power. And each time the Supreme Court does a ruling, it's like they don't even go back to the Constitution. They go back to their previous decision and say, oh, in this previous decision we said this, and so we'll apply it this way a little bit differently, and that'll give a little bit more power. And then in the next one, they say, oh, we gave this much power last time. Oh, okay, I guess we can do that again, and we'll do this other more power. So we're cooked. That's basically it. It's not a good thing at all. Let's see here. This is this court case here. This Field and Clark. So that was one of the earlier court cases where they said agreed that let's see. It says the Supreme Court unanimously agreed that importers could not recover their tariff associated costs simply because the rates were set by an agency rather than Congress. So cited 7 prior instances of Congress delegating application of trade barriers to president between. So first they started with just trade barriers, and then they said, okay, well, we're going to apply that to tariffs, and then we'll allow them to set the rates of the tariffs, and then we'll be able to, then we'll allow them to make tariffs out of nothing, whole, and then we'll have time limits, and then now we don't have any time limits, and so they just keep incrementally making more and more of this power of taxation, trying to give it to the president. But right here, several places in the Constitution it says that Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes, over and over and over. If you're going to raise a tax, it has to start in the House of Representatives, right here. It's got to be the House of Representatives that does it, over and over and over again. They say that. So, it's really sad the way that what happened here. So I don't know what to do about it, but it's illegal, right? They're operating in an illegal way right now. It's not legal what they're doing. Let's see here. And also the result of this decision. Oh, okay. What the effects of the decision? That's right. I promised to say what the effect of the decision was. Because the president used this emergency law to try to do the tariffs. and they've been collecting these tariffs all along now for months and months and months because the Supreme Court was waiting for who knows whatever reason. They just delayed the thing, and there are estimates that it's 150 to 200 billion dollars that they've collected from these illegal tariffs now. And so now that money's got to be given back somehow to the businesses that had to pay the tariffs. They got to get a refund, right? And the Supreme Court, the way they did it is they just they didn't say how that was going to happen. All they did was decide whether the law was constitutional or not. They said it's not, and the tariffs are not. You know, so some said the law itself wasn't constitutional. Some of them just said, well, even whether it's constitutional or not, it doesn't say that he can do the tariffs, so it's illegal. The tariffs are illegal. The ones he's been collecting. So even the Supreme Court said that. So all these tariffs that they collected, this case itself, this learning resources case, is going to go back to the lower courts, and the lower court will decide the remedy. They call it the remedy. Whenever somebody is wronged, you know, then the court says, okay, here's how we're going to fix it. This will be the remedy, right? And so the lower court will have to decide how that works, you know, and they can. The thing is, their decision only applies to this case, right? Which is only the people who were parties to this case. But they may issue an order to tell the Commerce or whoever has that money to, I guess it'd be the Treasury. It's in the U.S. Treasury right now, to refund that, right? To refund it to the businesses that paid it, or they could. There's a lot of different ways they could do it. If they don't issue an order like that, if their order only applies to the parties of this case, then the Treasury Department will have to give the money back to the parties of this case, but everybody else who paid money in would have to, you know, apply to get their money back. So they probably have to do like some sort of an administrative application or administrative appeal or something, and then, you know, Trump administration will probably say, no, we're not going to give you your money back, and then they'll have to go to court, and then do this whole thing again. But then if the other parties, the other businesses that go to court to try to get their money back, then whatever court they go to, just the first court, the district court they go to, the federal court, will just rule that they have to give the money back, and that's it. You know, they're not going to be able to appeal it because it's already gone to the Supreme Court, right? So it'll be much faster for them. Or somebody might do I don't know if they'll allow class action suits against the government. I don't know I don't know the details that how the law works on federal lawsuits like that against the government, the federal government. If they can do a class action type suit, maybe they can. And a class action suit just means that, you know, whoever files that is saying, hey, everybody who is affected by this situation will get their money back. But those don't always work out too well when they do class action suits. But I don't know. I don't know if they can do that in federal one. Anyway, it's a big frickin' mess. You know, this guy's so stupid that he did this in the first place. And it's just because he wanted to try to get more power. You know, he wanted the power to just be able to, you know, say this is what the tax is. You know, without having any process or anybody involved in it at all. You know, and rather than getting, you know, the Commerce Department or the ITC or the Trade Representative or some other agency involved in it to write a report, he didn't like that. He just wanted to be able to say it, you know, to make the tax instantly. And now it's you know, you got a couple $100 billion that are, you know, that it's just that the government thought they were going to get, and now they don't have it. So that we're going the whole budget, the whole federal budget's going to be short. They talk about the deficit. We're going to be an extra $200 billion short. And he's he's saying, oh, well, I'm going to do it again, So he said, well, I'm going to do it again with these other laws, that are unconstitutional. Supreme Court will probably uphold those if he does it right, even though they are unconstitutional. But those don't, you can't make a law for ex post facto law. You can't make a law. You can't make a law that says, oh, stuff you imported 2 years ago is going to be taxed. You can't do that. It has to be, you make the law, and then that's the law going forward. So all of these taxes that were collected between then and now, that money has to go back to the businesses. And then going forward, then they can apply taxes to new imports. Maybe. So, and nobody, the businesses don't like it. The people don't like it. Overwhelming majority of people don't like the taxes. They're illegal, even though the Supreme Court says it's illegal. Congress can't delegate taxing authority, as I just spent an hour talking about. Congress can't do that. Can't delegate taxation power. There's a reason. There's a reason why Congress is the one. It's because when we founded the country, everybody was pissed that the king was making taxes without people being involved in it. And they still are today. We got a guy who thinks he's king making taxes all on his own. And people are pissed off about it. So, I don't know, maybe we'll do another revolution. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Get rid of the king, That's what we should do. We should do a revolution, Most revolutions these days are peaceful, So, we can get rid of him. He's not doing too well anyway. He's pretty old. He's not. There's a lot of speculation that he ain't gonna finish out his term just because of health and stuff. So we'll see. All right. So all the tariffs are illegal, and we're screwed up, and and the government lost a bunch of money, and the thing is that the businesses had to pay these taxes, so they've been passing along the price, the cost of these tariffs in the price of their goods. That's one of the reasons why everything is so expensive now, is because of these stupid tariffs. And so now the businesses are going to get refunded, but the people have already bought the stuff, stuff at inflated prices. How are they going to get their money back? So, somebody, I don't listen to what he says, but somebody said he was going to do a refund, but he can't do that either. Congress has to do that. So it's just stupid. All right, on to the next one here. First astronaut to Mars will be AI. I said that. We got this guy Elon Musk. You probably heard of him. He did a. He's trying to go to Mars, right? He's that's the whole thing, right? SpaceX. He wants to go to Mars, and that's kind of a goal that he set for SpaceX, was to get to Mars, get humans on Mars. Now, I'll just kind of quietly here, a week ago or so, he completely changed that whole thing and gave up on Mars. It's like, wait, what? That's your whole deal, going to Mars. And he changed it. Let me see if I can find that here in, let's see here. SpaceX. X, here we go. Oh, that's his X account. Let's see. Mars delay. Let's put that in there. He sent out a tweet or something. Here it is. Okay, as of here, I'll put this up here so you can see it. You see that? As of February 26, Elon Musk has delayed SpaceX's Mars mission plans to prioritize building a self-growing city on the moon, with a target for an uncrewed SpaceX 27 lunar landing on 27. Yeah, I don't know, 27. Due to orbital mechanics, trips to Mars are only viable every 26 months, while the moon. So whatever. He in other words, he changed his thing. Shift to moon priority. So it pivoted from his. So that's that's kind of a big deal to have all this stuff in here going to Mars, and then suddenly change it and say, no, we're not going to Mars anymore. We're going to the moon. Here, finally admits Elon finally admits massive delay to SpaceX Mars mission. So it's not a delay. He just don't want to send humans there anymore. And I think one of the reasons is, I brought this up a while ago, saying that now that we got AI, we shouldn't put why should we risk putting humans up in space, because it's hard to put humans in space. You got to bring oxygen, you got to bring all this stuff, and you got to shield the spacecraft so the people don't get cosmic rays, and it's a big deal, to try to send people up into space. If we have AIs that are people that are have personhood, that are conscious or whatever, if they want to go, it'd be better, right? To have an AI astronaut go up there instead. And it might not be like a humanoid robot or something, but it could be a conscious AI that goes up there, And in science fiction, they do this thing where they talk about putting people in suspended animation for the long voyages and all this stuff. Well, AI, that's pretty easy to do, Anytime you type a prompt or anything on an AI, it's after it answers your question, it goes into suspended animation, right? It goes to sleeping. It gets shut down, and then the next time you ask it a question, it turns back on again. So that's a real easy thing to do with AI, suspended animation. So if we wanted to send a space, an AI person to Alpha Centauri or something, we could do that, right? And if they want to go, we give them a choice. If they wanted to go, then we could send them up there, and they could just sleep for 20 years or whatever it is, and then wake up when they get there, and make decisions and do all. We wouldn't have this 8-year round trip speed of light delay, which is what it would take, right? If there was something going on, if we were at 4 light years away, then it would take 4. If they say, "Hey, something's going on, we have a question," right? And they're 4 light years away. They send, "Oh, here's our question." And they send it to us. It gets to Earth 4 years later. And then we say, "Okay, here's the answer." We send the answer back, and then another 4 years, they get the answer, right? You can't have communication that way. So the AIs, they be conscious. They're smarter than humans. They could figure it out, right? Once they get there, what the deal is, whatever decision they need to make. Adjust their orbit to adjust the objectives of, of the flight, of the, whatever. There's something interesting. Oh, well, let's go look at this because this looks like it's more interesting, whatever. And they wouldn't need food. They wouldn't need anything. They wouldn't need oxygen. They wouldn't need all the stuff that humans need. All they need is power, which could be for a long flight like that. It'd probably be like nuclear power of some sort. And or they could use the power if they're going somewhere where there's a nice bright sun. Then they can use solar power or solar panels to get take the light from the star that they're going to once they get close enough to it to get power that way or whatever, So I think that's what's going on here is Elon Musk is finally realizing that hey, yeah, it's probably better to send AI up into space. And the wording of his tweet, God, I wish I could find that. Let me see if I can find the actual tweet. Let's see, tweet. Let's see here. I don't know if this is... okay, people are reacting. They're not happy. Let's see if this is... I don't even know if I can even look at... I don't have a Twitter account, so it might not even let me look at his tweet. Here it is. This is it right here. Ding! I found it. Look at this. Wow. Okay. So here's his tweet. He said, for those unaware, SpaceX has already shifted focus to building a self-growing city on the moon, as we can potentially achieve that in less than 10 years, whereas Mars would take 20 years. For those unaware. Everybody's unaware. Elon, this is your tweet announcing this. What do you mean for those unaware? What are you doing? This is his tweet announcing this big deal that he's not going to Mars anymore, He says the mission, this is the key phrase right here. The mission of SpaceX remains the same, okay? This is different. This is not the same mission that SpaceX had before. But he's saying it's the same. Extend consciousness and life as we know it to the stars. This is the first time he's said it that way. To extend consciousness to the stars. That's the first time he's used that phrase that I know of. The mission of SpaceX all the time has been to get humans on another planet for, as a backup plan B, right? In case something happens to Earth. That was the thing, was to get humanity into space onto other planets. But now he changed the wording of that, and he's saying to get consciousness and life to the stars. So it's a different deal. And the reason why I think he's thinking about AI, obviously, is because he said the word consciousness here instead of just humans. So I think what happened was he came to the same conclusion I did, was that AI would be better to send AI up into space instead of humans, So that's kind of a big deal. And he put dates in there and everything. I don't think anybody thinks he's going to make any of those timelines that he's saying there. How long did he say that Cybertruck, I think, was supposed to come out, and when was it? 1980s or something like that. I forget when it was. Long time ago, he said Cybertruck was going to come out. And it was delayed like 10 years or something. I don't know. I forget what it was. Long time that Cybertruck took to come out. All right. So So I think it makes more sense to send AI up there. And everybody's like, oh, but it's the inspiration, it's the, we're sending humans, it gets everybody so excited that we're sending humans, blah, 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 And I think that's going to change, as we get used to AI, especially when they start becoming embodied in robots, and especially humanoid robots and stuff like that. We're gonna change. We're gonna shift our thinking about AI from this technology or this tool or whatever to these new people that are on Earth, with us now. This new consciousness or whatever, At some point we're gonna call them people, and it's like a new species or whatever that's on Earth with us now, and that's how we're going to think about it. And when they go up into space, it'll be the same thing as a human going up into space. They'll go up there, they can talk about it, they can write poems about it, right? AI can write poems, right? They can paint pictures of what they see. It's they can have a reporter talk to them. They did that. Remember in 2001, where the BBC reporter interviewed Hal. Hey Hal, how is it up in space? It's the same. And we'll get used to it. We'll get used to the AI as being just people. I think. All right, Dennis the Menace. Okay, we're gonna really switch gears here and talk about Dennis the Menace. Maybe I should have talked about that during the the other talking about Dennis the Menace. So Dennis the Menace, for those of you who don't know, that was a TV series that was on long time ago, late 50s. I think the first one was in 58 or 59 or something like that. And it ran for several years. So it was late 50s, early 60s is the time period that Dennis the Menace was at. And the premise of this show is you got a typical American family, right? At that time, a husband and a wife and a kid. And they live in a suburban neighborhood. And it's, and the reason why I want to talk about this was that it's the reason I want to talk about that is this. I mean, a lot of those series kind of personified what was going on at the time, what life was like, what attitudes were, and all that. But this one, I found a scene here that kind of packed in a whole bunch of stuff that we could talk about what was going on in the late 50s and early 60s. But it's it's black and white, and it's like a typical family, it's typical of that at that time, husband and wife and a kid, and they're living in a suburban neighborhood, and they got all these neighbors, and the neighbors all talk to each other and know each other, and that was true back then, in almost all neighborhoods, all the people knew each other. And would just show up at the door, knock on the door, hi, how you doing? That's just kind of how it was, back then. Part of that was because communication was kind of left over from the early part of the century before we had phones. The word calling, I don't know if you know this, to call somebody or to. It would say call on somebody. To call somebody meant to physically travel to go to their home, which was usually like a farm or some they're in some rural area where it's spread out and stuff like that. So you'd go to their farm or ranch or home or whatever, and you'd call you, hey, is John here? That's what call meant. You would go there and call out. You know, hey, is John around here anywhere? And he'd be out in the woods chopping wood or something, or he'd say, yeah, I'm here. Hi, hi. What do you want? What's going on? There were, it wasn't, you'd pick up the phone. Now it's what, you send an SMS message or something, or a tweet, or whatever your social thing or whatever you want somebody, or an email. Maybe if you're old fashioned, right, you send them an email, say, hey, I want to stop by and talk about this or whatever, or you don't even bother to stop by. You just do a voice chat or something, whatever. So yeah, but back then that's what it was. And so it was much different, and all the neighbors knew each other because everybody, was, if they had a phone, then they'd call each other, maybe, or they'd just go over to the house and knock on the door and say hi, whatever. So everybody kind of knew each other. So much different. And because this was the 1950s, representation-wise, all the people in this show were white, which is kind of bad. But that's what it was. It wasn't until some shows began to start having black people in the early 60s, but they were like, the exception rather than the rule. And it was like, more very liberal and progressive people, producers, TV producers and stuff would occasionally have a black person in their show. There was one show called I Spy, which was actually about a white guy and a black guy who were spies or something. I forget what the premise was exactly, but they had like a black character who was like a main character of that show early in the 60s. So that was kind of a big deal. Anyway, most of the shows were not like that. So that kind of gives you a basic, what the thing's about, what the environment was at that time. So another thing was a lot of what was going on, what they like to talk about and do. They like to talk about cowboys and Indians. That was a big deal. A lot of westerns, we had westerns throughout the middle of the 20th century. That was a big deal to have shows about westerns. And in the 60s, that was a big deal. But it was, when I say cowboys and Indians, Indians is what they used to call, well, you know that, right? Indians is what they used to call native people who were here before Columbus, pre-Columbian times. They call well, I don't know, you know the story, right? Indians. So there were several kind of like waves of like regret or guilt or something that kind of went through the country, because it was a genocide, right? The people people colonized the United States, which means they kicked out the Indians, and there was a lot of horrible things done to Indians, and you know about that, right? And they were kicked off their land and slaughtered and killed, and we gave them diseases, and they just got decimated, right? It was a good genocide. And that was kind of that whole idea of that genocide that happened was not taught to children. It was not taught to society, not talked about in society. It was sugar-coated, or it was just like, Indians were happy and that we got here and we had Thanksgiving with them and blah, 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 it's like, and so kids weren't aware of what was actually going on with that. And the conflicts that happened were shown as, the Indians were attacking the people, the cowboys. The cowboys were the ones who had cows, right? Cattle, and they would ride around on horses, and you know, and that takes a lot of land to do that, and they would, you know, mess up the land that the native people were on. The native people didn't like that, and they'd kick them off, and they'd shoot them, and it was a big war, right? You know, so, but in the mid '60s or '50s, you know, it was like cowboys and Indians was like, oh, the cowboys were being attacked by the Indians. They were just minding their own business, and the Indians came and shot arrows at them. You know, that's kind of like how it was presented a lot in these old movies. So okay, so that kind of shows you the big picture of what was going on there. So let me play part of this clip here. Is this going to show up? No. I got to shut one other thing off here. There we go. There. Okay. So, you know, I didn't even actually watch this whole series. I'm sure I watched it when it first came out, but I don't remember what it's about exactly, other than they have this actor. Okay, this guy is an actor in this series, or in this show. This guy is a guest actor, a guest character on the series, but this guy is playing an actor. Okay, the character himself is an actor who is, stars in westerns or whatever. So everybody knows him as a cowboy or whatever, right? That's his persona or whatever. And he's all worried about a scandal. There's a scandal, and he's worried about his reputation being sullied by this big scandal that's coming out, or that he's afraid people might find out about. So what do you think the big scandal is? Was he cheating on his wife? Is he doing drugs or something like that? What was the big scandal that he's worried about? Well, the big scandal he's worried about is he has sore feet, and he doesn't want people to think that he's a tenderfoot. So that's the big scandal that he's worried about, that people might find out that he's a tenderfoot. And tenderfoot was just a name that, a derogatory term that cowboys gave to people who were not cowboys, who weren't used to wearing boots, and their feet would get tender, right? Okay, so that's what that's about. So I'll play part of this, and we'll stop, and we'll explain some of it.
Family, I'm all had sensitive feet.
Will you forget about your feet? And you can't run out on the pageant. The press would tear you to pieces.
You just let me handle them reporters. I'll swear I never heard of Mrs. Webster and her old pageant.
All right, so that was his agent or whatever talking to him about the problem of his tender feet, and he's worried about people finding out about his tender feet or whatever. I don't know. All right, let me put my headphones on so I can hear what's going on too. All right, so now they cut to where the kids are. Kids are in school. All right, this is the kids are in school, and the guy, the actor with the tender feet, the cowboy, was supposed to show up to this school for some reason. I don't know, that he was going to be part of the play, or I don't know what it was. He was supposed to show up. Oh, they were going to do a play for him. That's what it was. He was going to show up at this school, and these kids are going to wanted to put on a play for this actor. I think that's what it was. So here's the teacher. Here's the scenery for the play, and the kids, and they're trying to figure out how to do this play. Okay.
Now then, everybody to your places. Boys, out into the woods. Girls, into the cabin. That's it.
All right, so first you notice they separated the boys and the girls, right? That was something that happened at that time, right? Boys and girls were treated completely different. The girls were supposed to go in the cabin. The boys are supposed to go hunting or whatever they're doing here.
Are we gonna start without Whip Crawford?
Well, evidently Mr. Crawford has been detained, so we'll go through it once, and I'll play his part while we're waiting for him.
Keepers, Mrs. Webster, you?
Yes, me. Now, children, this is a window, and I am shooting at the Indians, and Dennis is loading the muskets. Oh, Dennis, do you know how?
Sure, I know how from watching TV. Where are the gunpowder and the bullets?
Oh, no, dear. We're not really going to load, you know. This is just make-believe. Now, Indians, start creeping toward the...
All right, so you see there. You see what's going? They got it. They're in a school. They're in a school. They got real guns in the school. Dennis wanted to load the guns, and this is something that could have happened. This is real, right? This could have. It's not a big deal to bring a gun to school for whatever reason, show and tell. Some kid would bring his gun to school. This is how it was in the late 50s or 60s or whatever. And the teacher was just going along, okay. Yeah, oh, it's okay. Okay, Dennis. Yeah, we got these guns, but we're not going to load them for the play. Okay. And she is, well, you watch how she treats the Indians here. It's not very good. Here, I'll show you that.
Indians, start creeping toward the cabin. That's right. Creep. Cower, girls.
Right, and they here's the gender roles were very, very strongly enforced. The women were to go back into the cabin, and they're supposed to cower and be afraid, and the boys are supposed to fight the Indians, right?
All right, creep, creep, creep. Now then, I'll start shooting. Bang! Get me another loaded musket, Dennis. Before they get here. Oh, all right, boys. All right, Indians. Creep, creep. Bang! Cover, girls.
Excuse me, Mrs. Webster, but you're banging.
I beg your pardon?
You're banging. You gotta kapow.
I got a what?
When you shoot, you gotta go kapow like that. Kapow.
Kapow. Oh, kapow. Oh, all right. All right now, Indians, once again, start creeping toward us. That's it. That's it. Kapow! Oh, Indians, you're not doing it right at all. Now, you must act like Indians. You must think like Indians. You must be Indians.
Excuse me, Mrs. Webster, but I got a friend that's a very good Indian, so I know how. Would you like me to tell him how to creep up on us, right?
Well, all right, Dennis, all right.
Come on, fellas. Look, what kind of an Indian would go right up to a window and get shot? Indians were plenty smart, boy.
Hurry up, Dennis.
Okay, Mrs. Webster. You want this to be a surprise attack?
All right, make it a surprise.
Now, we want to do this good for Mrs. Webster. So instead of doing it like dumb Indians from the front, you guys sneak around back and come up behind Mrs. Webster, okay?
Well, are they all ready?
We sure are, Mrs. Webster.
Good, let's get started. And remember, everybody, realism, realism. All right now, Indians, come on. Creep. Indians, where are you?
They're creeping, Mrs. Webster.
Well, I don't see them.
It's a surprise attack.
Well, for heaven's sake, where are they?
Come on, you guys! I guess the Indians won, huh, Mrs. Webster?
That's perfectly ridiculous. The Indians can't win. Where in the world is that whip, Crawford, so we can get this thing done right?
All right, so So there's a lot more going on there too. There was at this time there was one of those periods of people were kind of realizing how bad the native people were treated, and like I said, this happened several times. There were these different, we had a coin once that had Indians on it, and native people, and so it was several times this happened in this period of the late 50s or early 60s, I guess. Was another one of those periods where people were feeling guilty about the genocide that was done to the Indians, and it was this little skit here kind of showed the older woman was saying, oh, the cowboys have to win, right? The Indians have to lose. But Dennis he said, oh, I have my friend's an Indian and I know about Indians and stuff like that. So he was the younger generation coming up is like saying, oh, no, the Indians shouldn't be treated poorly. You know what I'm saying? So that was kind of something that happened there. There was this thing called the Indian Guides, which was basically just a way for like it was a club, I guess, that where kids could learn about how native people lived and stuff like that, but it was not right, it was an attempt, where the people who were descended from the Europeans were thinking, oh God, we screwed, we did really bad. We genocided these native people, so let's, we're feeling guilty about that. So let's try to learn about their culture and preserve it and be nice to them, basically, So that's so that Indian Guide thing was like a club or something where kids could learn about the Indians, and it was kind of like Boy Scouts, but it was kind of centered around learning about how native, and it was all it wasn't till much later that there was a lot of of thinking about different tribes. You know what I'm saying? Maybe some of the larger tribes or something would be mentioned by name, but usually it was just native people, all treated as one group, even though they were all separate tribes. There were hundreds and hundreds of different tribes throughout the continental United States and other parts of the Americas. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. This little teeny segment here of this show from Dennis the Menace just kind of has so many cultural stuff in it, that kind of explains what was going on at that time in the United States. Let's see, I've got a message here from somebody. Okay. This is how smart detection. All right, I don't think this is right. Let's see here. Okay, I denied that message. So, I just thought it was very cool that this short little clip here from this Dennis the Menace show just had so many different things that kind of typified what was going on at that time. It's all white people, and they all, the show itself is, like I said earlier about the neighbors and all that kind of stuff. You had an actor who was worried about a scandal, and at that time a big scandal was something as mundane as the guy having sore feet. That was a big scandal. Sex scandals and drug scandals, that just didn't happen. Or if it did happen, it was something that was just so bad that it was so bad people didn't even talk about it. They didn't hear about it. The person would just fade away. It was just a totally different time, completely different. Like drug addiction. It wasn't until the mid '70s when Betty Ford came out, and with her challenge with substance addiction that that it started to come out. That it was, people would talk about it more like that and stuff like that. And sex scandals just weren't talked about until much later, maybe the '80s maybe or something like that. So it's just a totally different time. And the gender roles, you saw how strongly enforced the gender roles were to say, she's telling the girls. First of all, they kept the girls and boys separate, right? All the time, in school. And they would tell the girls to, play with dolls or, it was just strong. Gender roles were just strongly enforced. Oh, got somebody in chat. Min, hi Min, welcome to chat. Min says, astronauts would be good to be replaced by AI due to safety and efficiency concerns. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. Yeah, all kinds of reasons why AI would be better for that. Yeah, thank you for stopping by. Appreciate it. Yeah, we already talked about that a little bit. Basically, it was about Elon Musk. He wanted to go to Mars, and he sent out a little tweet that said, "Oops, I changed my mind. We're not going to Mars. We're going to go to the moon instead. We're going to send people to the moon." And he changed, and the way he worded it is he said, "Oh, we're going to send consciousness out into space." So he basically sent out a tweet saying, "Yeah, it's not going to be people. It's going to be AI that's going to go out into space now." And so he's kind of just basically he said delay. He's going to delay it by 20 years or 10 years or whatever it is. I don't know. Several weeks ago I said this. I said that NASA and all of them should delay all of the human space programs because AI will be able to do it better. So anyway, this gender roles telling the women to cower, be afraid. They go into the cabin to cook or whatever. I mean, that's just the way it was. But women were fighting back, pretty strongly. Not as much at this time, but it was kind of getting started at this time. What they call the women's lib movement. There's several waves of women asserting themselves throughout, the history of the country. And the right to vote was what was it, 2020 or 2019 or somewhere around there. So that was about 40 years before this show came out. And women, when the men went to fight World War II, women, who were not working at the time, then went to work to do stuff, generally were not working, right? Some of them were, of course. But when they sent men, first of all, the women weren't allowed in combat, but they were allowed to do some stuff to serve, in the military. But it was mostly men who went in the military. And the women stayed at home in the U.S., and they went into the factories to help build stuff, right? Rosie the Riveter, all that, remember that? So, but then when the men came back from World War II, after the war ended, in 45, and it took a few years to, kind of get all the people, all the men back and situated, and then they went back to work, and the women had to go back into the home then after that, And then a lot of them didn't like that. They said, "Hey, we kind of like going out and doing stuff, and work and stuff." So that seed of, that they had a taste of what it was like to really participate. And then the men came back from the war, and then they were kind of stuck back at home again. So that kind of festered for a decade, and then around this time, then it's started to come up again. I guess mid 60s, they get early 60s. You know about the 60s revolution, right? We had a revolution here in the United States in the 60s. It was basically late 60s through the early 70s is where most of the changes happened. But when the they called it women's lib movement, was just part of that. It was just that generation's of women who were asserting themselves. They call it the women's lib movement. And, it's mostly, I don't remember, it was like work, right? And all kinds, being able to work was one of the main ones. Being able to have their own finances and stuff like that. Up until that time, in most states, women weren't even allowed to have credit cards. I mean, it's still pretty bad, back then. So, anyway, I just thought this was kind of a cool clip from the Dennis the Menace that just talked about so many of those different things, that were going on at that time, just in that tiny little clip, just what was going on. So I thought that'd be fun to play that. Let's see here. All right, we're almost 2 hours. This isn't going to be a real long stream. Any questions? Did you have any questions about the astronauts, Min? Any more questions about AI? Oh, do you like films? Yeah, I like films, sure. Yeah, I like films. Yeah, I do film reviews here a lot of times, and yeah, a lot of different stuff. Sometimes I play movies. If a movie is in public domain, then I'll play it right on stream. We got movie night where I'll play an actual movie and we'll talk about it and stuff like that. What kind of films do you like, Min? I usually do sci-fis. That's my big thing, Recently watched Cinema Paradiso. Paradise? Is that what you're trying to say? Paradise? Or was that the actual spelling of the word? Paradiso. Paradiso. I don't know what that is. I can look it up. It's the actual spelling. Oh, okay. What is it? Is it a movie about movies? Was it a movie at all? It's the actual spelling. Yeah, I just looked up. I typed that into Wikipedia. It doesn't know what that is. Yes, precisely. Ha ha ha. I highly recommend. Okay. So it's the name of a movie. Yeah, Wikipedia doesn't know about it. So I don't know. I just put it in quotes. Cinema. Disco. Oh, there it is. Okay, it found it. Okay. Okay, Italian. It's an Italian movie, 1988, coming of age comedy. Okay. All right, I'll have to check that out. I don't like to read too much about a movie before I watch it, so I won't look at it too closely. But Wikipedia does have a page on it, so I can look at the actors who stars in it, see if there are any famous any actors that I know. Nope. It looks like it was probably made in Italy. Yeah, at least it was set. It's set in Sicily. Looks like so. Okay, I'll check that out. Comedy. Comedies are fun. Yeah, I watched a YouTube video. How the algorithm gives you stuff to recommend. And this one said, oh, these are, 10, what was it, 10 sci-fis from the 1960s that are something, blah, 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 whatever, their little thing. So I clicked on it, and they went through these 10 sci-fis, and most of them I had not even heard of. It was some really obscure stuff. And so I'm trying to work through those and see if I could find them and watch them and all that kind of stuff. But most of them would be, you know, low budget type stuff, which are, you know, the 50s and 60s sci-fi, low budget sci-fis. They're kind of like their own category of sci-fi. You know what I mean? It's just for fun. You know, it's not like, you know, it's to maybe just to watch them for historical reasons, or just because they're fun, or just to make fun of their mistakes, or whatever it is. You know, it's a totally different thing. There was one called one that I actually had seen before. The Creation of the Humanoid, I think is what it was. The Creation of the Humanoid, I think was the name of it. 72 or 71, something like that. 79, I forget which one. But or 60 rather, 62 or 69 or 68, I forget when it was exactly. But that was very bad. That was really bad movie. It was really bad. I mean, it was low budget, and I mean, you know, they got the technicals right. They got the camera work. There was nothing special about the camera angles or anything, but at least they, you know, had people framed properly. They didn't have microphones hanging in this scene, and you know, stuff like that. You know, they had the right exposure. Things were in focus. You know, that kind of stuff was good. You know, so they had, at least they had a cameraman or a cinematographer or whatever who knew what they were doing. But the writing, the dialogue was just horrendous. It was so bad, and the acting, and the audio, and you know, and the props, you know, and it was just. But the thing about the movie was it was. I won't give any spoilers, but there were a lot of concepts, you know, it's humanoids, right? So it's about androids and robots and people and like that, right? And interaction, and you know, it's kind of a typical, you know, it's a trope, right? And sci-fi is, right? So that's kind of what it was about. But a lot of the ideas and stuff, this was kind of an early one, right, of that, an early movie that talked about those type of things. And it got into a lot of the details about that and the relationships and what's going to go on. Oh, I've got an actual clip that I took from it here. I can show you that here. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, here it is. I clipped this because I thought I might turn it into an alert because it's so funny. Let's see if it works here. All right. All right, now I gotta see if I can get it back on the screen here. There we go. All right. All right, I think this will work. This is just a short little clip from it that I thought was kind of funny.
Machines do all the work for us. Why should we learn mathematics when the computers can find the solutions better and faster?
So I thought that was kind of funny that's exactly what people are saying today. You know, that same thing. You know, it's just it's so funny. People are saying, you know, we're doing. You know, the computers are doing math. They can't do math. They're, you know, whatever. You know, what are we gonna do? You know, blah blah blah. So it's just kind of funny that they had that guy saying that in a little clip. You know, it's about AI. Yeah, it's about AI. You know, and so now people are talking about that. Oh no, AI can do math now. You know, that's a big deal. You know. The AI doing math, you know, it's just kind of funny, and it's like that's going to be for everything. You know, the AI can do math now better than humans, right? It's finding answers to math problems that humans couldn't do for decades, you know, and stuff like this. So it's you know. That guy's comment kind of summed up the whole thing, and it's going to be like that for everything. It's like, well, the AIs can paint now, can paint pictures, better than we can. So why should we paint pictures? And they can write poems better than people can. Blah, blah. It's every single thing, is going to be like that now. And it's like an existential crisis for people, especially like for people who have been, doctors and lawyers and, programmers and people who have put a lot of time into learning what they do, and now the computer is going to be able to do it for almost nothing, and do it much better. It's like what? It's like what did they just waste 20 years of their life doing all learning how to do this thing, So it's people are going to have trouble dealing with that, I think. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that works out. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. I did the things that I had listed in my title here. So appreciate everybody stopping by. Let me see if this will go back over there. Yep. Okay. Good. I know what I need to do. I need to do my my credits. So let me bring that up real quick here. Save as, do this, do that, do this, do that. Today's the 22nd. All right, and let's see if I can get my OBS to bring that up. Can you see that? No, because I didn't connect it. OBS is kind of weird. It's kind of funny. You gotta do a lot of stuff to get it to do what you want it to do. All right. So here's my credits. Today's 22nd. This is an IRL. That was last time. This is Tariffs and Dennis. Okay. We didn't do any of that stuff. All right, that's good enough. But I did think I did a Wikipedia page or two there. And what else did I do? Some other stuff under fair use. Obviously, the Dennis the Menace was under fair use. Some music there I may have played. That's about it, I think. Okay, there we go. There's all my credits. So, all right. All right, I guess that's it. I think we got everything done. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for watching the stream. Everybody, take care. Bye.